Hey, everybody, welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Derling, and I've got a very, very special guest. He's been on the show before, and it is always a pleasure to talk to Canadian guitarist extraordinaire, Mr. Sean Kelly. How are you doing, sir?
Hey Tim, good morning. Sorry, I apologize for my appearance here. It's early in the morning here, and I'm a little misshaven, but I'm deep in writing a book myself, so I'm gonna give myself some artist leeway here,
Absolutely,
author leeway in this case.
absolutely. Yeah. Cut yourself a little slack.
Yeah.
So Sean's here to talk about the excellent guitarists, past and present, in Night Ranger because that's always been something they've been known for, having two great lead guitar players. And there haven't been a lot of changes in that slot. And of course, there's one guy that's been there right from the beginning. So, but I guess before we get into that, Sean, we'll start with when did you first become aware of Night Ranger and what were your thoughts when you first heard them?
It was definitely Sister Christian, the song
Yeah.
Sister Christian, and it was on a compilation. I had one of those compilations that would come out in the 80s on cassette, right? And I can't remember which one it was. Hit
K
Express, maybe.
KTEL, one of the KTEL ones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, or Quality Records
Quality.
did them too.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it was called Hit Express, and it was Sister Christian. That was definitely the first time that I'd heard Night Ranger, and I remember being taken with the chorus, and I always kind of loved power ballads that had a little bit more power than ballad, right? And that was one of those songs. So that was the first time I became aware of the band, and I would read about them. I was more into the heavy metal side of things back then, but they were also in your circus magazines and your Faces magazines and Hit Parader and everything we'd be reading. But really, when I became a fan was Seven Wishes, and it was the song Four in the Morning, because that was a radio hit in Canada.
Yeah.
And that's still one of my all-time favorite songs. I think that's a nearly perfect AOR song.
Yeah.
So that's when I became a fan. And yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, you and I are both up here in Canada, and Night Ranger were never a band that I think they've played here twice. I think in looking
Okay.
up their history, they played in Vancouver in '83. Open now, this I would have loved to have seen this opening for Kiss on the Creatures of the Night tour, and then
Mm,
they played I think once in Ottawa on the Midnight Madness tour, and the Midnight Madness record was a gold record up here.
yeah.
Sister Christian actually went all the way to number one here, peaked at number
Oh,
five in the States, but it was a number one song in
oh
Canada.
wow.
And but that's about it. They just don't seem to get up here, and it's a shame. But yeah, they did get some airplay, obviously, because and yeah, Sister Christian's where I became aware of them. I heard a bunch of kids playing it on a boom box, and all I remember is I just loved that motor and chorus, and then I got to hear it again, and it's probably the definitive power ballad. And you're right, it packs a punch. It's equal parts power and ballad. And
Well, it's got the slow gallop, which is very hooky, right? Dun, 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 dun.
yeah.
I remember I was in a production of Rock of Ages here in Toronto, and
Yep.
that was I think it's the second song of the show. And I
Yeah.
would just wait for it, where I got to dig into that rhythm, it's so much fun to play, and so melodic. And
Did you have to learn Brad's solo?
no, you know what? I didn't play the solo on that one in the show. It was my buddy Gino Del Sole. He did the
Okay.
solo, but I got to sit back and enjoy it and listen to it, and he nailed it every night.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I have learned it, because just in case Gino couldn't make it, I'd have to jump in there. But uh,
Right.
it's wonderful.
Yeah, and then nothing any worse than when radio would play one of the edit versions that got
Oh
the
yeah,
solo.
like
I just there's one edit that's I think is a crime against humanity where it goes right from the second chorus till the end.
right.
It cuts out the entire don't get me started. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, Seven Wishes, man, what an album. I mean, that's really when they as knowing who the band was, because I'd heard Sister Christian and then I saw the video for You Can Still Rock in America. And
Oh
I
yeah.
and I don't know if I realized at the time that I mean it's pre-internet. I was like 9. I don't know if I realized that was the same band,
Right.
that did both of those songs. But I definitely by the time that Seven Wishes and then the first single Sentimental Street came out, I was actively listening to the top 40 radio, so I was ready. And
Yeah.
at the time, I wasn't really into harder rock music, but I did love guitars, and Night Ranger just kind of struck that perfect balance. But as the years have gone on, well, I mean, the whole reason that I've done a book is the fact that like not enough people talk about just how good these guys were at doing this kind of melodic rock, and how Jack Blades was such a fantastic songwriter
And bass player, like
and bass
the
player.
guy's
Yeah.
an incredible bass player, like great funk bass player. Like he was schooled by guys like, who played bass in Sly and the Family Stone.
Larry Graham.
Larry Graham,
Yeah.
like, like he's coming out of that school.
Yeah.
And the guys, anytime I've only kind of very quickly met him when Helix, we played the Rocklahoma Festival and they were on the bill. But he's just constantly talking about music. He seems to be music obsessed. He's got like this buoyant energy, and you can just and I mean, look at his output. He never stops, right? So
Yeah, he never stops writing. I mean, he's
never stops writing.
written for a ton of people. Yeah, you're right. I mean, he was in Rubicon with Jerry Martini from Sly and the
That's
Family
right.
Stone, and Night Ranger music doesn't really suit that type of funk bass playing. But I mean, I've read where Rob Trujillo from Metallica, he started playing bass because he saw Rubicon at the California Jam, and Jack Blades is doing a bass solo. Like it's not, and in Night Ranger he plays for the song, but he's a great bass player in it. And every once in a while he shows off, a little bit
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
of his chops. But
Well,
his
it's funny in Night Ranger, often you'll see him with his hand off the bass. Like, I mean, he's fronting the band, but Brad's got such a thick sound, and Jeff or whoever is playing, and there's keyboards, right? So that
yeah,
low end's covered in the keyboards, and
yeah.
so he can be, because he's a great front man. But you'll often see him. I'm kind of going, when does this guy play?
I know. Yeah, a lot of people have said, "Is he ever going to play that thing?" I mean, I know he takes full advantage when you're chugging eighth notes on an open string,
Yeah,
and you can get your hand in the air and you can point at people and do that.
yeah.
But sometimes he'll just bong, like let it ring
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
Yeah, and
exactly. And
he's a
he's such a highly musical guy. He knows what's going down. Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah. He knows exactly when to play, when not to play, and you're right. He seems like a very engaging personality, and one of the things that I've always loved about their music is it's just up. It feels good to listen to.
Yeah.
It's just feel good rock music. But let's get into the nitty gritty of it. I mean, once you from a guitar player's point of view, obviously, I think one of the reasons why Night Ranger, even though they were I've always kind of considered Night Ranger a unique position because they weren't hard rock like Def Leppard or Whitesnake or Van Halen, but they
Yep.
weren't Journey or Foreigner or REO either. They were somewhere in between. And I think the somewhere in between comes from the fact that they had Brad Gillis and Jeff Watson, two amazing guitar players who each had their own sound, but they weaved that into the fabric of their arrangements. Those twin leads, the two guitar players playing off each other.
Yeah.
When did you first start to realize that, okay, not only are these catchy songs, but whoever's playing guitar here is really, really good?
Well, I started reading about them in guitar magazines because around, the time I started playing guitar, that was my best access to information, right? Was going
Yep.
to the Shoppers Drug Mart or Max Milk and
Yep.
picking up, or Mike's Milk in Ontario and picking Northern Ontario and picking up, Guitar for the Practicing Musician or Guitar World. So it was in the pages of those magazines. You'd start reading about guys like Jeff Watson and Brad Gillis and start hearing about all these techniques, right? Like whammy bar technique or eight finger technique. And I was like,
Yep.
the hell's that? So I started reading about this. And then I remember actually flipping through, I think before I ever heard Don't Tell Me You Love Me, I saw the solo transcribed in a guitar
Okay.
description, right? So I was just,
Yep.
look at all these notes. Like, whoa, how do you
Yeah.
play all that stuff? Like,
Yeah.
and it wasn't like you could just go on YouTube and listen to it. I'd have
Exactly.
to track it down somewhere. And yeah, I heard it later, like probably after Seven Wishes came out, is when I would hear. I've heard all that other stuff. When I didn't have a lot of money, right? It wasn't just I had to wait and be judicious about what I was spending my money on.
Mhm.
Who knows? Maybe there was a Rat record coming out that day. I wanted more, right?
People don't understand that, yes, you couldn't you weren't surrounded by this music if you didn't have a buddy that could tell you, hey, you know what, they got two other albums, or hey, did you know about this or did you know about
Yep.
that? Or here, let me make you a copy of this.
Yeah, and that was a lot of it, getting
You know,
copies.
you're doing your chores, you're getting allowance, or maybe you got a part-time job, and it's like,
Yeah,
I don't know, I've got to make a decision here, and this better be good
yeah.
because, you know, so yeah, and you couldn't just, oh, I'll go listen to that. It's funny you mentioned that because I mean, I mean, I play guitar a little bit, but I was never technical, and I was never one for sitting and reading tab, but I do remember getting, I around 1990, I found a bunch of old circus magazines between like 84 and 86. And that was really cool because I was actively buying circus.
Yeah.
But in 84 to 86, they were writing about bands that they weren't writing about by 1990. You know, Y&T being one of them, and
Hmm.
Night Ranger being another. And I remember seeing a transcription of the solo from Rumors in the Air from uh,
Yeah.
Midnight Madness, and it was Jeff Watson's solo. And I knew enough. I mean, I knew how the solo went, so that I knew when I saw these three blips, that was the na 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 na. Like, so I was like,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
that's
You could
obviously
tell.
what that means, but that's where it ended. But yeah, I mean, these guys had, even amongst guys that liked heavy music, they had the respect
Oh,
because they
sure.
had Jeff and Brad. And I mean, of course, you have the fact that Brad played with Ozzy.
With
That
Ozzy, that was it.
that was instant cred for a lot of people. He did the Speak of the Devil record, and
Yeah, actually, you know what's funny? The first time I ever heard Brad Gillis, and I kind of write about this in my last book, was my cousin playing me the Speak of the Devil album. And I didn't know anything about anything then, except for that I was terrified by the cover of that record.
yeah, yeah.
But the sound of that record, Jeff had this incredible, or sorry, Brad had this incredible stereo spread guitar sound on that record that was pretty revolutionary at the time, I think. Like it was a massive sound, guitar sound. And he covered, like, it really, in a lot of ways, was a very influential sound. Later, the hard rock that came later, with this wide stereo spread. Oh, did we freeze up there? We're still
Yeah,
going? Okay.
yeah, we froze up, but you got as far as sound was pretty revolutionary at the time.
Yeah, like the wide stereo spread and the very saturated but very clear guitar tone, right? Thick, but still had definition. That was like one of the first times I heard that kind of refined take on an Eddie Van Halen tone,
Hmm. Yeah,
where it was a little more syrupy, but still had punch, you know? So I remember the sound of Brad's playing on that record. And then, you go back and you find out it's that guy. And then sure,
right.
I hear the sonic fingerprint, right? So he had
Yeah,
that going on early. So a lot of those California guys did. They were kind of all informing each other in the clubs before they ever got on record. And then they all kind of got on records at the same time, and their little differences, kind of went
yeah. I mean,
had
yeah,
tentacles.
like you're right. I mean, obviously Eddie was way up there, but you had George Lynch, you had Warren DeMartini. Uh,
Jakey Lee,
yeah, I got
Carlos
to
Cavazo,
yeah, got to give my man Dave Menichetti a shout out.
Manicetti was
Um,
massive,
yeah.
and he's like playing with Sean back in the day, like those guys together.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, Bay Area. Yeah, for sure. And I'm
Yeah,
sure they go way back with the Night Ranger guys too. And again, Brad, that's like guitarists have their preferred guitar. He's always had that red and black
that
Strat,
Red
and he
Strat.
still plays it. It's all beaten up, but it's like when I saw them a couple of years ago, I was like, there it is. There's the Strat and the
Yeah,
whammy bar. I mean, he's called known as King of the Whammy Bar. He could use what he did with the whammy bar. Would you say it was like, because lots of guitarists were doing whammy bar stuff, but what Brad did with it, and the Sister Christian solo is a really good example of
yeah.
just making those notes last and bending them to where he wants them to be. He knew exactly where they were going to end up. Like,
Oh,
what
for sure.
what is it about, how he was able to I guess get the whammy bar to do what he wanted it to do?
Well, in order to do that, it's almost like it's a Jeff Beck approach. Your ears have to be so finely tuned to intonation, to keeping things in tune and understanding the physics of what you have to work with. But he also in the studio for that, he created a feedback loop by being in the monitoring room, right? So
Yeah.
he's getting the saturation from his amp that's being mic'd up, but then that's feeding through the speakers above. I think there were speakers above, monitoring speakers. He found a sweet spot where there be a feedback loop started happening, and he was working that. So there was this kind of nonstop sustain, and he found the kind of the spot where the feedback broke up nicely harmonically, and he was able to just ride it. So it was like having, there's a device called an EBO, same thing. It
Yep.
creates a magnetic
Yep.
field, keeps the string vibrating in perpetuity. Same thing.
Yep.
So he had that going. But beyond all that stuff, he obviously dialed in. He was one of the first guys to use a Floyd Rose, like, and I believe he had one without the fine tuners. I think he just like, had one that clamped down, and you know that was it. He'd set it and forget it, and was wise enough to know how to string it up so that he wouldn't have to adjust it. He'd clamp that thing on and be in tune for the whole night. I'd love to find out how the hell he does that, because God knows I struggle with it. But yeah, I think he found out, hey, I like this. This is doing something unique. And then he started doing the fluttering. He'd tweak it with the tip of the bar,
I
his
the
fingers.
yeah, the best example of that is the "Don't Tell Me You Love Me" solo before it cuts over to Jess Mark. Wow, 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 and then a
Yeah,
big whoa, like a
yeah.
big pull up on the whammy bar. And yeah, and it's very lyrical. And you're right. If you listen to that Sister Christian solo as many times as people have heard that song, listen to that solo. There's never a moment where there's no guitar. It's always humming there in the background. It's wow, 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 like it's just but it's beautiful. I mean the note
Oh,
choices and even playing using the whammy, the
yeah, articulating with it,
yeah.
like, yeah, which is a very Eddie thing too, right?
Hmm.
Where rather than picking, you're articulating by depressing the bar. And my favorite version of Brad abusing the bar is actually on that hearing aid guitar solo.
Oh yeah.
And
Yep.
that thing just makes me laugh now, because what other shred solo can everybody who ever got that record? We all know it. We can all sing every note of
Yeah.
it, but there's no real melody half the time. It's
Yeah.
just guys trying to outdo each other. I have to tell you, I got a funny story. I'm going to really digress here. Last year, Coney Hatch, we went and played the Sweden Rock Festival, and Blue Oyster Cult were on the bill.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And the minute we were side stage, because Andy, our bass player, is friends with their bass player. So we were, sitting beside stage. And Buck Dharma comes walking, and I said, you know what? This is highly inappropriate. I never bug people at a gig.
Hmm.
I need to talk to Buck Dharma. I said, sorry, Buck, I have to ask you a question about your solo in Hearing Aid Stars. And he just kind of looks at me like, just got off the stage. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah.
But he was great, because he has the best solo in that whole thing.
Very
He
melodic.
every guy, him and the other guy was Eddie Ojeda. Both those
Yep.
guys, because they played melodically and slow. Like they had themes in their solos. The other guys are just like, it's which is great. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I know.
But
I know what you mean, but yeah, like, at first in 86, you get down, 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 down. It's like, well, anybody could do that. Yeah, but you remember that part.
well, you sing it, yeah, and and
Yeah.
and that's it. But you could just see. Anyway, I talked to Buck, and Buck had this whole theory. He goes, "Well, these guys can all play a million miles an hour. I'm going to go the other way.
Yeah.
I'm going to play the most melodic hooky stuff." I think he said, he goes something like, "There are more notes in that solo than have ever been recorded previously in the history of man," or something.
Yeah.
Said something
Yeah.
funny. Anyway, sorry, I digress. But having said that, Brad, still does some cool stuff in there, right?
Yep.
Like, still finds some cool little melodic intervals. But yeah, he both those guys, both he and Watson, have such a highly developed melodic sense. Sometimes when they're not employing their actual trademark techniques, you don't know who's doing it,
Yeah.
because they both have a similar sense of architecture in the way they structure a solo melodically.
And, talk about playing for the song. I mean, there's so many hooks that aren't vocal hooks, but and they aren't necessarily if they're not if they might be complicated, but they don't sound complicated. They're just melodic. Like the end of "Don't Tell Me You Love Me," that
Yeah,
like that's just what that song is perfect,
yeah,
perfect for
yeah.
what that song needs. And then they start harmonizing, or "When You Close Your Eyes," that that
Oh
guitar
yeah,
line. I
yeah.
mean, it's just
That's
fantastic
Watson,
stuff.
right? That's Watson's
Yeah,
solo.
that's a Watt. That's
Yeah.
Watt. I mean, that's his song. So I'm thinking he does the lion's share.
Yeah,
Yeah,
gorgeous. It sounds like a Burt Bacharach melody or something, you know? It's incredible.
you could, yes, you could transcribe that melody and you'd never know it was in a, quote unquote hard rock song. But yeah, I do remember I read an interview or watched an interview with Brad talking about the hearing aid thing, and he's like watching all these other guitarists going, what am I gonna do? So he said, you know
Yeah.
what? I'm just gonna do what I'm known for, but it's perfect, you know. I mean, I love the hearing aid. I mean, I think that's
Oh,
one
me
of
too.
that is one of the that needs to be reissued. I don't know
Oh,
if it ever will be, but I love that. As you might look back on it and you go, well, that's a little bit cheesy. All those benefit songs are cheesy. It's
I think
but
I
this
think
one
it's the best of the bunch in
but
terms of
this one
composition.
rocks.
Yeah, it
This
was
this
very, very good. You know,
yeah
it's like the song I always want to hear on Dio records. Like it's perfect tempo, it's the
yeah
perfect amount of hook, it's still got the power. You know what's funny? I remember when we were opening for Def Leppard when I was in my band Trapper, we were just fooling around, right? And started playing that in sound check. I didn't even make the connect. Vivian Campbell,
Vivian, yeah,
he kind of looks up and walks by, like, what are these jokers doing? I'm going, let's stop. He thinks we're making fun of him. But
yeah
we
yeah
loved it. We loved it,
yeah.
right?
It's like when Metallica were opening for Ozzy, they were playing a bunch of Black Sabbath stuff. He thought they were
And
making
taking the
fun.
piss.
They were in awe. And so yeah, it's funny. You don't make that connection. Yeah, Vivian co-wrote that. I mean, he's playing
Yeah.
that clean, lovely, clean guitar at the beginning of that. Yeah, man, what a star-studded cast of players on there. But yeah, so yeah, but you're right. Of all the people, Brad is one that you can easily pick out. I mean, I can pick out Yngwie's part, obviously. I can pick out George Lynch, but Brad's whammy stuff. I mean, to me, that's the peak of the solo.
Yeah.
Everything that comes after that isn't quite as cool as that whammy bar.
Yeah. Like, where else do you go after that? Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So, so obviously, Brad's got the notoriety for being an Ozzy's band, but I don't think Jeff Watson gets talked about a lot. Talked about enough.
Well, it's funny because, and this is my recollection, okay? Because the first album I actually bought, I don't think I bought Seven Wishes. I think I might have recorded the videos or something. But the first Night Ranger album I actually bought was Man in Motion.
That's a
And I
great
bought
album.
it because it was in the delete bin so quick.
Yeah, it's my
But
favorite album, but it did
me
not
too.
sell.
Me
Yeah,
too. And I was sorry, my dog disagrees, but
it's all right.
yeah, I bought that because of a Guitar World magazine interview. They were on the cover. Because remember, this was going to be their make or break record, right? Like
Yeah,
this was it, and they kind of were going to get toughened up. They were definitely making a big deal. Like this is a big guitar record, right?
yeah,
And I don't know if I was sensing this or if I was just reading it in the way it was put across, but it sounded like there was a sense of competition between those guys then. And it kind of now I wonder if they were just taking the Mickey. I think they got along okay. But that Watson was the guy, like with the real technique. And Brad kind of had to pull up his socks to get to the level where Watson was at because Watson had the eight finger thing. And remember, at that time, speed was paramount. Like that's what
yeah.
everybody focused on. How fast were you? And I kind of remember thinking that, like, oh yeah, I think the big dog here might be Watson. In retrospect, I kind of think history is showing that it's Brad Gillis's band and Brad is, the guy, right?
But
But
yeah,
or what, but really, the fact of the matter is those classic solos had two players with a similar melodic viewpoint, but they had complementary skill sets that kind of took you from A to Z in the world of crazy guitar technique, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, the solos from "Don't Tell Me You Love Me" are just the Brad's part and then Jeff's part, and they're both absolutely perfect for the song,
yeah,
and
it's
you'd miss one
perfect.
of. And I saw a clip not too long ago. I'm not sure when it was recorded, but it just came up in my feed of Nuno Bettencourt playing both parts.
Of course.
Yeah, and then
Apex.
singing. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. It's like, yeah, of course he's going to sing it too.
Yeah.
But yeah, but and it's funny you mentioned that. Like, "Don't Tell Me You Love Me." I don't think I heard that song, and I think one of the first new things I bought from them was the Greatest Hits when that came out in '89.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
was probably the first time I heard that song because it was a minor top 40 hit in the States, but I don't ever
yeah.
remember hearing it in Canada. I just remember hearing basically, I don't think I'd ever heard When You Close Your Eyes until the Greatest Hits either. I don't remember that song. I remember Sister Christian, You Can Still Rock in America, and then, Sentimental Street, 4 in the Morning, Goodbye, and
Yeah,
that they'd have
goodbye.
this
That was a
Secret
hit.
of My Success, whatever the
Yeah, yeah,
singles
that's
were,
right.
right?
That's right.
But yeah, they it's interesting too because they're one of many bands. I think they did all right. They had a couple platinum albums and a gold record, but it just seems like the talent they should have done better. But it's like I think maybe they didn't have the image that was required. Although they did have there's a definite look to them. I mean, how many bands have the rhythm section as the two singers? That was different. You had Jack
Yeah,
singing, and then you had Kelly singing with the drums turned
that's
sideways,
right.
and these two fantastic guitar players. And yeah, you're right. Man in Motion was talk. Guitars are back. Alan Fitzgerald had left, keyboard player. There's still keys on the album, but it is very guitar centric. As a matter of fact, there are a few songs when I hear, Jack's songs, where I go, I can hear some of these songs wouldn't sound out of place on that first Damn Yankees album, which was only 2 years down the
Totally.
road.
Reason to Be could have been on that
Yeah,
record. And,
yeah,
and you know what I loved about that record too was that acoustic, the melding of
mm-hmm,
acoustic and power rock, and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
Don't
Reason to
Stop
Be.
Thinking, I think, is one of my favorite. Yeah, well, that's Brad at the top of that, right?
I think so. Yeah, it definitely sounds. It's got that liquid.
Yeah,
It's yeah,
totally,
but
totally.
yeah, on the acoustic, yeah, Reason to Be in the beginning of Love Shot Me Down. I mean, there's
Oh yeah, Love
great,
Shot Me Down's
great
beautiful.
acoustic playing on the. But I mean, there was always, I mean, Let 'Em Run from
Oh, I
Midnight
love that song.
Madness, which I think that's Jeff because
Yeah.
that's a Watson song. So, but so obviously we fast forward a little bit, and something goes down, and around 2007, around the time of their Hole in the Sun album, Jeff is only on two songs on that. He's gone, and then for a very very brief period one of my favorite guitar players, but I don't think of him as being a Night Ranger because it was just blink and you missed it. It was a little bit like Mark St. John and Kiss. Reb Beach
Yeah,
joins
that's
the
right. I
band.
forgot about that, but you know what's funny? I remember reading that Reb joined the band and going, and Reb's famous for being such a fluid right
Yeah.
hand tapper, right? Two-hand tapper. But he was going, oh man, how am I going to do? I don't do this. I don't do eight fingers. I just do. But and how he would just kind of accommodate and say, well, I'm going to do it the Reb Beach way, which is always the best way to be yourself when you step into a situation like that.
Yeah, it's funny, just off topic just a little bit. I'm a huge Winger fan. I've seen Reb Beach twice now, but I've seen him with Dokken. I saw him with Dokken in 2000. I saw him with Whitesnake in 2018. I still haven't seen him with the band that he's best known for. But that was like a real blip on the radar. I think he's only on one officially released live album, The Rock and Shibuya.
Yeah.
But I mean, the songs, it's not one of those cases where you hear the songs and go, something doesn't sound right. Like when you listen to you so eloquently put it in your Don't Call a Hair Metal book when you listen to the Whitesnake live stuff from the '87 album tour.
Yeah.
And listen, I just saw Adrian Vandenberg in concert and he was amazing. But you listen to the stuff and it doesn't sound right because it's not the same guys. I
No.
don't get that feeling listening to Reb playing Jeff Watson's parts. It sounds like Night Ranger to me.
Yeah, right. It worked. And you know what? I could see how it would work. Reb was probably an optimum choice at that point.
Yeah, I mean, he was, and it made sense for him to be in Dokken replacing Lynch, and it made sense for him to be in Whitesnake too. Those weren't. It made more sense for Reb Beach to be in Whitesnake than it did for Steve Vai to be in Whitesnake. Put it
Yeah.
that way. And I love
Yeah,
Steve
yeah.
Vai. I love Steve Vai, and I like that album, Slip of the Tongue. But it makes more sense on paper. You're like, yeah, this melodic hard rock. This melodic hard rock. I get it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he was probably a fan. It was probably one of those cases where it's like, yeah, I've been itching to learn this stuff or have a good reason to learn it.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Give me
Reb,
one just a second, buddy.
yeah,
I got to get another coffee. Can we
yeah,
pause it for
no,
a
yeah,
second?
no problem. So of course, Reb's time in Night Ranger was very brief, and then they ended up getting a guy who Joel Hoekstra,
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say I know him, but I have met him on a couple of occasions.
or
And
played
yeah, well,
shows
I
with.
remember what I remember succinctly about meeting him was we were backstage at this Rocklahoma festival when I was playing with Helix, and it was Rat and Night Ranger, Helix and Warrant, I think, and Hurricane Alice and Danger
Oh
Dave.
yeah.
That was
Oh
it. So
yeah.
anyway, fun bill.
That's a
But
yeah, it's a good bill.
and looking forward, like playing with Night Ranger, that was a big deal for me. I was very excited about that. But talking to Joel, and as you're talking, the guy like saying, "Hey, how's it going?" He's having this casual conversation, but he's playing the most mind-melting stuff while he's talking to you like casually. And I was just like, "Oh, okay, this guy's got another gear." Like I can't believe I couldn't even focus on what he was saying because what he was playing was so brilliant and it was just effortless. So, he's got big hands and a great technique and like he was doing that stuff flawlessly.
Yeah. So
So,
the
and
two
I
albums
and
he did with Night Ranger are fantastic. Somewhere in
yeah,
California
that
and High
somewhere in
Road.
California,
Yeah.
to me, that song in particular is one of those rare situations where you have a classic band from the 80s who put out something that's just as good as anything they put out prior. Like that is
It's
truly,
it's a very rare case of that album in general where like normally if somebody's interested, they say, "Look, I got the greatest hits. I got Midnight Madness, Seven Wishes. Where do I go next?" Usually you suggest another classic album. Somewhere in California, I would say this is Night Ranger.
yeah,
You know
yeah,
that this sounds like it could have come right after Man in Motion. If there'd
yeah.
never been a Damn Yankees album, if they hadn't broken up, this sounds like it could be the follow-up. It's that good. It's that in that spirit. And Joel was obviously the right guy because I mean, I mentioned very briefly Hole in the Sun. Just my opinion, and talking to a lot of people about it, about all their albums. It's a lot of people's least favorite Night Ranger album because it's a complete and total identity crisis. It does
What
not.
about that one with Gary Moon?
Now I like that album.
I don't
I
mind it
like I
either.
like that album, but it's not Night Ranger. I
No, no, I
like
don't.
I like that album the same way I like the Motley Crue album from '94
Mm.
with Karabi. Hey, it's a good album. It doesn't match the name that's on it, but
Yeah, that's
it's a
right. That's right.
perfectly good album. But Hole in the Sun, you've got the original. Well, you've got you don't have Fitz. You got Michael Lardy, but it does not sound like Night Ranger. It's an angry album. It's aggressive. It's
Yeah,
without a
and
character, and
I
you
get
can
it.
hear I can hear the tension in the band in the music. So
Yeah.
obviously Joel was just the right guy to complement Brad's playing and complement the rest of the band. He doesn't overplay, although he's perfectly capable of overplaying. There is a track uh on High Road that's just an acoustic guitar duet between Joel and Brad called LA No Name. I'd listen to a whole album of that stuff. It's
Oh wow.
fantastic. Yeah,
I'm not familiar with that. And to be honest, after I had somewhere in California, and then I think that's the last one I bought.
yeah. I
But
think
that,
all of those albums that came out like after Hole in the Sun and they did Somewhere in California and then they've done three albums since and they've all been really strong. They've been they're kind of overdue now for a new one, but they're all really good. I mean, I think Somewhere in California is the best of the bunch.
yeah,
But the other ones, there's no real dip in quality. The
yeah,
songwriting is there,
sure.
and having seen them, I've only seen them once. I got to see them last year. Sorry, 2 years ago. 2023 is 2 years ago. I saw them. It was the closest I went to Guilford, New Hampshire to see them. It was with the when Bret Michaels was doing his Party Gruff thing.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't a headline gig, but it was still Night Ranger, and I did a meet and greet, and it was awesome. But Jack and Kelly still sing really well compared to other singers of
Oh,
their
sure.
age. I mean, that's a tough thing. I mean, as you know, not
Very.
everybody can be Carl Dixon. Not
Yeah, that's
everybody's
right.
not everybody's got those golden pipes. But
Amen.
man, Jack and Kelly, they're just I don't hear any in Jack, I hear maybe a little off the top end, but he compensates for it. Kelly sings like he's 30. I
Yeah.
just don't get it. Like it's mind blowing. And Brad, I mean, Brad is the constant. You mentioned feeding off the mojo. I mean, it's when Brad takes the solos that, or when Kelly sings, you're reminded, oh yeah, this is the Night Ranger record. But
Yeah.
but Joel was very complimentary, and then of course, I mean, obviously that got on David Coverdale's radar, who's you know always had an eye for fantastic guitar players, right?
And he's not
Uh,
afraid to pick them when he needs to
and
out of
he
another
yeah
band.
and he'll say how much do you need my
Hmm.
like he'll write a check. So Joel's gone after High Road and they end up with Carrie Kelly and
Great.
I don't think they lost a step. What do you think
No.
about Carrie as a player?
Well, I had the pleasure of watching. I actually met Carrie a couple times. One, I was in a band with Nick Walsh from Slick Toxic called Revolver.
Right.
And
Yes.
we warmed up a bunch of dates for Vince Neil when
Mm-hmm.
Vince getting back in shape to go and open for do the Motley reunion.
Yeah.
And Kerry was playing guitar with Vince
Yeah.
at the time. And you know, nice guy. But I really kind of got to watch him and see what he could do in Alice Cooper when Crash Kelly went out on tour with Alice Cooper. And he was playing with Damon Johnson at the time. And those
Yes.
two guys together, what a formidable guitar duo. Like Carey has lots of chops. What's interesting about Carey, he's got a similar edge that Brad brings to it, a similar rock and roll sensibility. So it's not necessarily, how do I say it? He might not do all the eight finger stuff exactly like Jeff does. But what I like the energy. He brings kind of that more street punky thing to Night Rain,
Yeah.
which
Well,
is his
if you
vibe.
look at the bands he was in,
Yeah.
it's Night Ranger are a relatively tamer band, but
Mhm.
he's got that street, he's got that L.A. Guns,
Yeah,
that kind of
sleaze rock came out of that Hollywood thing, right? But
yeah,
he's got all the facility and technical ability and feel, and yeah, he does a bang up job, and it doesn't surprise me. I think any band that brings him in kind of gets a gets a high quality product out of him.
yeah. And he's been in the band now for over 10 years.
Yeah,
So
he's
obviously something is working not only musically but personality wise. So I
yeah, I
mean,
think he always seemed like I don't know these guys well at all, but just in hanging out with them a little bit, always friendly, nice guy. Doesn't seem to say a lot, probably just easygoing guy. And you need to be like that when you're walking into an established situation because there's I don't want to say hierarchy, but there is hierarchy and there's politics and there's, if you
well,
can navigate a band's personal history and complement the music and it's not just about the playing, and this is what people don't necessarily understand. When you are moving into situations that are established, lots of people play great guitar.
yeah,
Go on YouTube. I could go right now and find a 6 year old who can kick my ass around the block. Like that's just
yeah,
the way it is. But can you get on a plane? Can you get your passport together? Can show up and be a performer and be
yeah.
friendly with people and get along and understand when people are having
Can you hang?
can you hang?
Can you be on the road with the same
Yeah.
bunch of guys for
Yeah. Can
months
you do
on
the
end?
job, look as good as you can, and then not be an asshole? Those are the
Yeah,
three components to
yeah,
being a successful musician, I think.
yeah.
I
So
mean,
there,
not
yeah.
necessarily successful artists, because I know some very successful artists who I wouldn't want to spend 2 seconds with as a human being, but I absolutely love them as performers.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's right. And some people are better at hiding that. But it's funny because other than the split with Jeff Watson, and I remember reading a little bit about it when it went down. It was probably over money or rights to something
Well,
or
I think those
other.
are very different human beings.
Yeah,
And I know where, from seeing things that are posted, I think there's probably a political fission that happened in that band because, you know, you've got Jack Blades who's Captain USA, and then you got, Jeff who can be, quite critical.
yeah. And also
of-
the fact, I mean, I think the fact, I think the keeper of the flame in Night Ranger would be Jack. And there's no better evidence of that than the fact that they called their eighth album Seven.
You're
So
right.
the Feeding Off the Mojo album, that's like the Elder. We don't talk about
Yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah, yeah. That they're not breaking that out at the merch booth.
Yeah. I think it's a good record, but I digress. But yeah, but I don't think that they're a particularly difficult bunch of guys. I mean, the fact is that Brad and Jack and Kelly, you've got three-fifths of the original lineup still out there doing it. So, and I've also had this theory that as great as they were with Jeff, when the chemistry has gone sour and there's no going back, you're going to end up with Hole in the Sun. You're going to end up with an angry, out
Yeah,
of focus, like I said before, identity crisis of an album. So sometimes you need that bit of new blood to kind of remind you what you like doing about this in the first place,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. I agree.
So, so Sean, this has been fantastic talking, Night Ranger and talking the fantastic guitar players. And at this point in time, I want to talk about what you've been up to.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, honestly, I'm working on a new book right now. I'm butting up against my deadline, so talking with lots of guitar players. It's a book about odd shaped guitars, pointy guitars, and you know you know when I sit down to write a book, I start with one plan. I end up with a totally different book
Hmm.
because it's interesting. As far as a guitar player, I know very little. I've got a lot of guitars. I got a lot of gear. I got tons of pedals and amps and all that stuff. I don't really care about the details of it. I realized I said, wow, I've really picked a bad topic to write about. But what I'm interested in is the shapes of the guitars and how they inspire people and the sounds they make without getting too technical. And it kind of led to a bunch of cool stories with a lot of different players. So my book's called tentatively anyway, Battle Axe, Hard Rock and History of the Pointy Guitar. And I talk with a lot of 70s and 80s guitarists and guitar makers who kind of took the Flying V, the Explorer, and the Firebird kind of shapes and ran with them, right? And how that
Yeah.
spread out and how that became such an important part. The visuals kind of showed people how to listen to the music, and you know what were the people behind the boom. I found out some really interesting things, made some interesting connections that I didn't know about certain guitar makers and certain players. And anyway, I've been focusing on that. I've been doing some guitar clinics for Jackson Charvel and working on an instrumental record, just, because I needed something to play at the clinics. And that's going to eventually turn into an instrumental record. Of course, Lee Aaron and Coney Hatch, busy. I was just in the studio working with Coney Hatch. Um, which I'm not going to say anymore,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
working on a couple of
Okay.
things.
Yeah.
Working on a couple of things.
Watch this
Uh,
space.
yeah, watch this space. Yeah. And, Lee Aaron's got some fun stuff coming up. I'm working on a documentary too. So there's always lots going on as well as teaching and yeah, man, I'm sure there's other things I'm forgetting and letting fall through the cracks, but that's the way
Cool.
it goes.
Yeah, I definitely want to have you on when the book comes out. It sounds really interesting. It's funny when you mentioned the funny shapes. There's a couple things that come to mind. You mentioned the Flying V and the Explorer. Like to me, those are two of the ahead of their time guitar shapes, right? Because you see, was it Albert King in the early
Yeah,
60s playing a
Flying
Flying V?
V.
It looks like, was this guy a time traveler? Or it's weird. And then even the 70s, playing with Ace Frehley playing an Explorer. But one that came to mind too was Joe Perry playing the BC Rich towards the late 70s.
Oh yeah.
That looks like an 80s guitar, but there he is on live bootleg, with
Yeah.
the BC Rich. And but the first funny shape one that came to mind is a very brief period, I think around 1980, when Paul Stanley played that star-shaped guitar.
Yeah, he had that one star-shaped guitar. There was a guy out of New York who was making guitars. I think that guy was actually the same guy who worked on like JJ French's Twisted Sister, Pink Les Paul, and
Right, right.
yeah, Steve Carr. He was
Okay.
he was making those kind of odd shaped guitars, made and making like that first little Flying V you see him playing early on that got stolen.
Yeah,
Yeah, and Gene's early basses, those are custom made instruments, right?
yeah, yeah. Because you've never seen anyone else play. What did he call it? The grabber, the bass
Yeah,
that
the
Gene
Gibson
played.
Grabber. Oh,
Yeah,
Chris Novoselic, he
yeah.
played.
That's true. That's true. But that's
Yeah.
probably why.
Well, yeah, exactly. And because those guitars, like anything, they were the cast-offs that were cheap and you could get.
Yeah,
Same with really, I won't get too far into it because it's in the book, but really like those Flying V's and Explorers, they were failures.
yeah,
And then people like Billy Gibbons started getting hip to them because they were well made and they had the humbuckers, the Seth Lover humbucking pickups that were making the heavy sound. So
yeah,
there's a whole connection between engineering, design, like you say, the space race. Like there's all sorts of
yeah,
crazy stuff that made. Hold on, I'll show you one. What
yeah.
does this guitar remind you of? Does this guitar bring to mind anybody?
Oh, that's Def Leppard. Like
You
that's
got
is
it.
that Pete Willis or
Well, yeah, Phil Collins
Phil? Okay.
would have been playing this, and the
Yeah.
Leopard guys were playing Hamer guitars. But this is what inspires me about pointy guitars. I see something, and it's evocative to me of a memory I had as a child,
Yeah.
and a guitar I can never afford. And now when I go on the road, like I saw this. This was I was playing a gig in Calgary, and a friend of mine who I do guitar clinics with, said, "Oh man, I was in a Long McQuaid, and there's going to be a flash sale, and they've got this '84 Ibanez Destroyer," and I'm like, "I need that guitar." Launched a whole ploy for me to get
Yeah.
a guitar with people
It,
waiting in line for me.
it's
Like this is
crazy. Like just seeing that black Explorer shape, I'm picturing the Pyromania videos.
that's
And I
it.
guess with Pete Willis, what I was thinking of, he played a white Explorer
He played a
um,
Hamer.
on the in the high and drive videos, and I'm not sure, but he looks like he was quite a little guy, and that guitar is huge in his
Well, that's
hands.
it. It's interesting to see how certain guitars, and this is another thing I talk about, how a guitar has to fit against you and be part of you, right? When you're
Yeah.
playing. And I talked to Carlos Cavazzo about that, like, how different things fit certain things, and how sometimes those pointy guitars were lighter than a Les Paul, so you could pull certain maneuvers. There's also,
Oh, yeah. The strap like the Cinderella guys used to do. The
yeah, those
yeah.
Kramers. If you do that with, now I'll tell you, I did see Cinderella, and those guys were flipping around, throwing Les Pauls
Les
around.
Pauls, those are heavy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man. And this guitar, I got to tell you, this guitar is heavy because anything that has three pickups in it, these things aren't light. And it's a pretty solid guitar. Anyway,
Well, what a that's so evocative of the classic
totally.
Def Leppard stuff. I mean, I just picture the Foolin' and Rock of Ages and
Oh, perfect.
Phonograph, and yeah,
And that's really, Tim, what the book's about, because I realize there's only so many things you can say about scale length
yeah,
and compound radius of a fretboard. Who gives a shit?
yeah,
Unless you're a guitar player, pardon my language.
yeah.
But really, the memories and the history and the people and the choices that companies made. It was a wacky time. I've got a balalaika guitar downstairs from Gorky Park.
Oh
That's a
yes,
whole that's a
yes.
whole story of,
I can picture it. It's like a triangle.
yeah, man, of
Yeah,
corruption and glass nose. Like it's a heavy tale of
yeah.
buffoonery. It's actually
Wow.
the ultimate. It's like the Scarface moment of the American music industry,
Yeah.
and in some
Wow.
cases, literally the Scarface moment, and the hypocrisy, and like,
Oh,
to me, that whole
the make
thing
it
is a fabulous disaster. So anyway, I'm gonna
you,
zip it up because I got to
the
write this book.
the make a different drink foundation.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. I had a great talk with Scotty Hill about all that stuff.
Oh yeah, awesome. I mean, that's yeah. I mean, I was patient zero for being into that type of music when I was reading about that going on.
Yeah,
You know,
and all those compilation albums that came out because of stuff like that were what often, like Hearing Aid. I bought Hearing Aid and I bought the Make a Difference thing because that's what I could afford. That gave me a variety of artists.
hmm
Live
yeah,
albums, Wasp. I remember buying live albums because that was what I figured. I got X amount of dollars. What am I going to get? I'll get all the hits, and I'm never going to see this band live. This is my shot.
yeah. You had to you really had to pick your targets. You know, somebody else that just come to mind, and I won't keep you much longer, but somebody else that comes to mind that had a lot of weird shaped guitars was Ronnie Montrose.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah, he
true.
had that one had like a gun sight on it, and he had one that's, and then there were those Dean guitars
Yeah,
that I know Kerry Livgren from Kansas played them, but they had like a Les Paul top and an Explorer bottom.
yeah, the Cadillac.
Yeah, they that was kind of a different one. And you're right, Billy Gibbons. I mean, he's had some strange shaped guitars over the years, but the thing is, it's like, you know, it's one thing to have it, it's another thing to know how to play it. Like a couple years ago, yeah, a couple years ago now, I had the pleasure of seeing Steve Vai, and I got to touch the Hydra.
Oh yeah,
And it was like, and he actually utilized that thing was built to be completely utilized. It's pretty
yeah.
amazing stuff. But anyway, yeah. So Sean, thanks for talking about the Night Ranger guitar players, and thanks for contributing. And good luck with the book. Want to have you on to talk about that when it comes on. And Coney Hatch in the studio. Ah,
Yeah, yeah. There's
yeah,
some
yeah.
stuff coming. Coney Hatch does what Coney Hatch does. I'll just let things go. But yeah, we were in the studio.
Mm,
See if I get a reprimand. I don't think so though.
yeah. Oh, it's all good. Andy, Carl,
We're
give
not
my
too secretive.
yeah. All right, cool. So yes, Sean, thanks for doing this, and don't forget follow Sean on all the socials, and pick up and pick up his other books too. Metal on Ice, Don't Call It Hair Metal,
Hold
all
on.
that stuff.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna do
yeah,
a
yeah.
cheap plug. I'm
Yes,
gonna do a cheap plug.
absolutely. Yes, I never miss a chance to do a cheap plug. So there you go.
This is back in print now. You can get this
Yeah,
from Dundurn Press, whatever their website is, dundurn.com.
I got to get that too because I was remiss on that one. But the Don't Call It Hair Metal,
Don't
fantastic
buy it
read.
on Amazon. for a number of reasons, but because they only have it in like this weird large print version that someone put out. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Good to know.
Yeah, buy it right from your Canadian company.
Yeah. Cool. All right, Sean, thanks for doing this. We'll talk to you later. Good luck out there on the road. Keep safe and, say hi to everybody, and we'll see you later
All right, man. Take it
on
easy.
Tim's Vinyl